One of the things which has been, I think, characteristic of the Middle East over the last 100 years has been the exceptional role of intelligence services and security services, both in the Middle East and outside the Middle East, in the history of the entire region. Not only were the states and countries in the Middle East, as they evolved after World War I, and this is now something which is almost 100 years away, not only were the regimes inside the Middle East, as they evolved, regimes which from the outset believed that one of the major prerequisites they needed, one of them was to set up an intelligence and a security apparatus, but also the outside world, the world from the East, Eastern Europe, Russia, and far into Asia as well, and the West, Europe and the United States and Latin America. All of them tried to use the intelligence services in their countries as a major channel for contact and for activity of a very, very discrete nature, which was very, very essential at the time. It was essential because societies in the Middle East have been in transition for over 100 years. The societies in the Middle East have not yet reached a level of stability which they would have liked. Societies in the Middle East have always tended to consider it essential to have a level of clandestine capabilities which enabled them, on the one hand, to know what was going on inside their countries and also to control events which might take place and which would be detrimental to what they thought were the interests of a particular state or a particular society. This is something which is not, as you know, only a Middle Eastern characteristic. There have been other countries and other ages in world history, recent history, where intelligence services have been key players in their own countries. I cite the countries of Eastern Europe. I cite the Soviet Union at one time and Russia, I think, today. I cite China and the way the Chinese system works. And I can tell you that even in countries which are generally believed to be on the democratic side of the scale, like India and others, yes, the intelligence service and the security service are considered to be essential. They're not only considered to be essential in order to prevent undesirable acts, they're also essential because they enable the political powers to promote policies, positive policies, which cannot be done in public, to promote peace, to promote dialogue, to promote efforts to bring about a better world and a better system. That's why, for instance, we're talking about the Arab Spring. Israel is not part of the Arab Spring. But in Israel, the intelligence services played a major role, a crucial role, in some of the major events bringing about peace in the Middle East. The peace between Israel and Egypt was hatched in Morocco. The key figures there were the King of Morocco, King Hassan II, and the head of the intelligence service at the time, General Halifi. And after him, General Qadiri. Names which are not familiar to the public, although their roles were public and known. They were able to do things in a positive sense of the term. which were considered religiously impossible in a setup, in a setting where religion did not permit either contact, certainly not an effort to peace. When it came to Jordan, yes, when it came to Jordan, the main conduit which brought about the peace between Israel and Jordan was the intelligence channel. And therefore, the intelligence has played these roles in the way that I am stating them. And these roles have not been just roles which have been played in systems which have been autocratic. It's not only in the systems where you had a king, or you had a president, or you had a general who actually controlled the country or the countries. It was also necessary, for instance, when after the Arab Spring brought about the change in Egypt a couple of years ago, and the Muslim Brotherhood took over the reins of government, and President Morsi became president of Egypt. Essentially, the system remained in place. Here and there, a figure was changed. A new chief was changed. And I'll say something about chiefs of services in a moment. But the essential function remained, whether it was the army in the past, or the Muslim Brotherhood in the present, or any other system which will evolve now in Egypt. Because the nature of society was such that the levers of government could not perform in any other way. And I'm not saying it in a sense of criticism. I'm not saying it in the sense of dissatisfaction. I'm simply stating a way of life. When it became necessary to reach a deal, which afterwards became public, but had to be hatched in a cocoon of clandestine secrecy, the only way to do it would be within the confines of an intelligence and a security setup. And this also became important because the head of the intelligence services, the heads of the intelligence services, became the main channel for contact between the outside world and the leadership. It was not the ambassador to Egypt, whoever it was, who conducted the substantive relationship between any country in the world and the president of Egypt. It was not the ambassador in Amman who conducted the major element of the substance of the relationship with His Majesty the King. And the same goes for Damascus, and the same goes for Baghdad, and the same goes for Tehran, and the same goes for Morocco. About Libya, I don't know today. Maybe you'll say something about it. But certainly in the former days, it was the head of intelligence who did it. It was a very sensitive position. Position actually which no insurance company in the world would take upon itself to issue life insurance to a head of service in the Middle East. That was, I think, a challenge which no insurance company would meet, because a head of intelligence ended up in one of three ways. Either he became head of state in the end, or he spent some time in jail, or very often what was left of him was only the head. Because of the nature of this position, because of the nature of what was being actually in his hands. Now, I'm telling you all this, and many of you people in this room are young people who are not accustomed to what I've been saying in the last few minutes. And I see looks on your faces of maybe of incredulous faces of saying, no, it can't be that way. But it can, it is that way. And it is that way not because it is an external desire of intelligence services to impose themselves on the body politic. It's because the body politic wants this system to evolve in such a manner. That's why, for instance, in Pakistan, which has now a democratic system of government with an elected president, an elected prime minister, the major force is the inter-service intelligence, the ISI, which is the strongest arm of government in the country. Not so much in overseeing daily lives of people, but of guarding the major strategic interests of state. And it is not for us, if I may say so, us, because I think we in Israel are exceptional. We do not belong to this kind of activity, because our system of government is probably identical to the system of government in this country and other countries in Western Europe. But I'm saying that we have to judge the countries I've been talking about not in terms of how we would like them to conduct their affairs of state and how we think that our system is the best and the most just and the most free system there is. But ultimately, it's those countries and those societies who have to decide how to conduct their affairs. And even ultimately, when they reach a level of, as I said, of democracy, and democracy, not a formal democracy, but also a substantive democracy, they still elect to use this system in conducting their affairs of state. And I believe that, I don't know why my Egyptian colleague to the panel decided the last minute to leave, but my guess is that some of the things I've been saying now would be very difficult for him to digest. And I guess also it would be very difficult for him to answer to these situations, because there are situations which are to some degree uncomfortable to many, many people. But there are two things, and this I'd like to end my opening remarks, two things which are essential to the Middle East today and will be essential to all the regimes of the Middle East if they want to survive, and if the peoples of the Middle East want to survive in the given environment in which they are living at the moment. And it is a phrase which was coined by none other than the man who established the dynasty in Saudi Arabia, the dynasty of Ibn Saud, who was a remarkable individual from almost any point of view, and we could talk about him at great length. A character who was unbelievably charismatic in his country, and by the way, who since his death in 1953, which I believe is 70 years ago, I think 53, all the kings following him were and are his sons. I think it's an all-time record, by the way, in terms of dynasties. That in the last 70 years, all the kings who have ruled Saudi Arabia, both the original king, Ibn Saud, and all the sons that followed him have all been his sons. He has said, we need two things to survive in the situation which we are in, which will be a situation which we will have to live with for a long period of time. We need security and stability. Security inside and stability in the region. And in the service of security and stability, the Middle East has been revolving for the last almost 100 years since the demise of the Turkish Ottoman Empire at the end of World War I. And until a degree of stability is achieved in the region, and this is nothing which I believe is going to be immediate, I think we will have to learn to live with this, with all its drawbacks, with all its aspects, but also with the fact that this is, to some extent, assures a degree of continuity and of daily life. Realize that when we're talking about this necessity to deal with terrorism, the only way to deal with terrorism is to have a system, an international system of security and intelligence apparatuses which operate as far as possible all over the globe, and who interrelate to each other, and who exchange information, and sometimes carry out joint operations, so that tomorrow morning you won't find an aircraft being hijacked here at Václav Havel Airport in Prague, or of Heathrow in London, or Charles de Gaulle in Paris, and so on and so on and so on. This is the kind of threat which the 21st century is meeting. And therefore, in such a configuration, the only way to be able to have a minimal capability to deal with these threats is to have all these groups in place, whether it is or is not entirely compatible with pure democracy, the way you have lived it, the way we live it in Israel, and so forth. But there comes a moment when you have to make very, very grave and serious decisions, and very difficult decisions, and decisions which relate to human lives, and which relate to problems which I don't want even to describe them to you, because they're so horrendous. But heads of state and prime ministers will have in the next years to come take instant decisions in order to avert terrorist threats. And sometimes the act of averting a terrorist threat will be an act which will also involve the loss of human life. We are right in the middle of this war at the moment, ladies and gentlemen. We're not anywhere near the end of it. And therefore, in conditions like these, what we're talking about is not something far away which relate to countries in the Middle East and the way they run their shops. But it's related to the question whether the world as it is today is sufficiently organized to deal with the major threat which it has to deal with. And I would tell you that I don't think that we should rest on our laurels. We are far from being satisfied with the way things are today. But without what we've been discussing this afternoon, it could be much, much worse.